In this video, we're going to be looking at the blood vessels that we can see on these wire models. So here's an overall view of it. I have it on a chair so I can turn it around easily. So right here we have the heart, and that's pointing towards the left side. The organs that we can see here, just to orientate yourself, this big brown thing is the liver. That's going to be found on the right side of the abdominal cavity. This blue structure here is representing the diaphragm muscle that separates the thoracic cavity from the entire abdominal cavity. Some other things we can see, I've tucked back here, are the kidneys. And then this organ over here is the spleen. So that's going to be on the left side. So when you're looking at the model, just be sure you're looking, knowing what's left and right. And the way these models are built, in order to simplify it a little bit, they showed the mostly arteries on the left side, and then they're showing the veins on the right side. For the most part, you can think of veins are going to be blue, arteries are red. The only exception are those pulmonary artery and veins. So that's what you can look for to know you're on the right compared to the left. So looking at the aorta, so here's that aorta coming up through here. Here's our superior vena cava that we talked about. We have the pulmonary trunk. So from the front view, we can see the ascending aorta. And then if we turn this around is where we can see more of the aortic arch. So coming back here, this is the aortic arch portion where we have these arteries that are starting to come off. And then as it continues down, that's when it's going to be referred to as either the descending aorta, since blood is flowing down at this point, or we could call it the thoracic aorta because it's in the thoracic cavity. Kind of from here, like all through there, would be the descending or thoracic. Once it comes behind the diaphragm, now it's sitting in the abdominal cavity. So this is when it's called the abdominal aorta. So coming back to the aortic arch here, we had looked at these on the heart models, but now looking at it on these blood vessel models, we have these three things that are coming off the aortic arch. So the first thing, kind of towards the front, more towards the right side. Again, there's the, vena cava is up here. This is that inferior vena cava coming down. There's the liver. So this is the right side. This small segment right here from the base there before it splits is called the brachiocephalic artery. So through there. The second thing to come off is the left common carotid artery in red here. It's called common because it's going to split, and we call them something different after that split. So this is the common point before that happens. The third thing to come off the aortic arch is the left subclavian artery. That's going to continue going to your arm. Once it's in the armpit, it's called something different. So we'll look at that in a little bit. So those are those three branches: brachiocephalic, left common carotid, left subclavian. So we have the two lefts. Okay, those are left out of brachiocephalic. So the right ones are going to be branching off brachiocephalic. So this one that's going up here is the right common carotid. It mirrors the left common carotid. And this one coming out here to the arm is the right subclavian, following along the same pathway as left subclavian. There are these thin ones here that are coming off. They come off the subclavians, technically. They go up. Think about it, looks kind of like a wishbone, or it forms an upside down V. These are called the vertebral arteries. They're running through the transverse foramen of your cervical vertebrae. Where they meet up in the middle, this structure here, this artery is called the basilar artery. This is going to be sitting kind of right along your brainstem, underneath your brain there. Kind of looks like a caterpillar. So the caterpillar basilar artery through there. So we'd mentioned the common carotid has a split. And so if you see a branch kind of going in here, trying not to get tangled here. So that one compared to this one coming out here. So these are the internal and external carotid. So coming in, this is when it's called the internal carotid artery. Coming out here is the external carotid artery. Let me zoom out so you can kind of picture that a little bit. So external is going to have all these extra branches coming off. There's some that are kind of going down, back here, through here. So this is going down your nose, your mouth. The one thing to know for external carotid, the very last piece to come off on the sides, this is sitting on the side of your head, right on top of your temporal bones. This is called superficial temporal artery. So that's an extension of the external carotid artery. We have internal in there, external, and then superficial temporal through there. So you only need to know right and left when it's written on your lab handout. So specifying like the common carotids and the subclavians. After that, you don't have to indicate right or left. Okay, so those are going to be the arteries in the area. Let's look at the veins. So the major vein connecting to the heart, we learned we have the superior vena cava. Inferior vena cava is going to be this portion. We're used to seeing it cut off really close to the right atrium, but it's actually going to continue all the way down this big piece here, and it's going to follow along next to that abdominal aorta before they're both going to be splitting around the hip area. So those are the vena cava. This smaller vein that's traveling along back here on the right side on the back is called the azygous vein. You have some other branches on the left, but you don't have to know them for the practical. So just focus on the thicker one is inferior vena cava. This thinner one is the azygous vein through there. So then if we look back at the front, coming into the superior vena cava, you're going to have the kind of another short portion of vein here on either side, and it's going to be getting veins coming from your head and coming from your arm. So these ones are called brachiocephalic vein. We had a brachiocephalic artery. Now looking at, we have the right brachiocephalic vein. Okay, you can always look for veins are on the right side. This one over here is the left brachiocephalic vein. So starting from like this split to the next split. Those are your brachiocephalic veins. You need to know right and left. So coming in through here, following along with the common carotids are going to be your internal jugular veins, the large veins in your neck that are bringing blood away from the brain. So know these as internal jugular veins. And on the model, it's showing one of it over here. This is your external jugular vein. We got internal and external. The model isn't showing it over here. Technically, this is going to be part of that, or vertebral vein is kind of tucked way back there. You don't have to note for the practical, but this is going to be the subclavian vein. Okay, that's going to be running along with subclavian artery in red. Okay, so we're only learning veins that have a different name than the artery or don't have a corresponding artery for the practical. So that's why we're focusing on these specific veins through there. And then finally, I wanted to mention the pulmonary artery and vein. We had kind of looked at that on the heart model itself. Actually, let me bring this back around front. So remember, we have that pulmonary trunk through there, and then that's going to split to be called the pulmonary arteries. All right, going back the other way. I'm getting dizzy yet? All right. So the very top ones, those are the pulmonary arteries going to the right and the left sides, kind of tucked in there. Underneath are going to be the pulmonary veins in red. They're bringing oxygen-rich blood from the lungs back to the heart. What this model's doing is showing kind of the branching of these arteries and veins, at least to one lung and to the other. You're going to have it on both sides, but the model just shows it on each side just for a little bit of simplicity. All right, so those are the arteries and veins that you can see kind of in the torso, the head, and the neck area.